Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So first and foremost, I do have to say a huge thank you to you guys. We finally did it. We reached over 100,000 subscribers. This is amazing because our community is growing. We have more people we can learn from. So thank you guys again. Now let's talk about something that has not happened since 1977, the port strike. I know I already made a video on this last week, but now that it has actually happened, let's talk about what it means. Ready? Let's go. So for those of you who are not aware of what is happening, just a quick recap. The strike is happening because the International Longshoremen's Association has asked for a new contract which lasts for 6 years, which would include a 77% wage increase over those 6 years, as well as no automation at the ports because that threatens their job security. Now, a quick note, because I know that most people really fixate on that 77% wage increase. This is actually not the biggest issue for this union. Their biggest issue lies with port automation because they just don't want to see machines replacing actual people. But anyway, fast forwarding to today, after not being able to reach an agreement, 45,000, close to 50,000 dock workers have hit the streets as of this morning. This effectively shut down all the ports pretty much from Maine all the way down to Houston. These ports account for almost 50% of the inbound volume into the United States. So what does that mean as of right now? Well, right now we have containers that are not being unloaded, containers that have food that is going to spoil depending on how long the strike actually continues, containers that hold inventory for retailers that is not going to make it to the shelves, containers that hold raw materials that manufacturers will not get in order to produce new product. Farmers are going to be affected, and so on and so forth. But the question is, aren't there any alternatives since the strike is happening? Well, according to FreightWaves, yes, there are. There are two contenders that could potentially alleviate some of this strike-related chaos. Number one is the Port of Portland in Maine, and number two is the PSA Penn terminals in Eddystone, Pennsylvania. But of course, there is an issue, unfortunately. When we look at the Port of Portland, Maine, they only have one terminal that is dedicated to containerized freight. But to top it off, they already said that the containers that are rerouted to them, they are not going to unload because they are going to honor the strike. So that doesn't help. Now, if we take a look at the PSA Penn terminals in Eddystone, Pennsylvania, unfortunately, yes, they did not say anything about the strike or honoring the strike. However, they did make it clear that they just do not have the capacity to handle that much volume. So whatever they do end up getting, it's still going to cause huge delays. But what about the ports in the West Coast, right? We have the Port of Los Angeles, the Port of Long Beach, both huge ports. We have the Seattle-Tacoma port here. Well, of course, because this strike has been looming for a while now, people knew about it. Some shippers have already pre-planned and rerouted their vessels to the West Coast, which has, in fact, increased those volumes by 18%. However, FreightWave states, and I read this in another article as well, I forgot what the article is, there is a possibility that the West Coast ports will stand in solidarity with the ILA, the International Longshoremen's Association, which means that they will refuse to service the USMX vessels that were rerouted. Now, as the president of the ILWU, which is the union in the West Coast when it comes to ports, said, and I quote, "The ILWU stands in solidarity with the ILA for a fair contract. From coast to coast, the ILWU and the ILA remain militant and resolute in our fight against automation." But if we put that aside, the fact that they stand in solidarity with the International Longshoremen's Association, there's also a different issue when it comes to rerouting vessels. Number one, there's an issue with the Suez Canal. Number two, there's an issue with the Panama Canal. So in either case, even if they did not stand in solidarity with the ILA, there would be significant delays of the product actually coming to the ports. So here's the issue. Right now we have a situation where containers are not getting unloaded. Those vessels that are getting rerouted to other ports will face delays, and in the worst case, they will arrive at the port, and because of the solidarity, they are not going to be serviced. This means that retailers are not getting the inventory to restock their shelves. Manufacturers are not getting the raw materials to create other products that actually we end up transporting in the trucking industry. Farmers are affected, and the list goes on and on. So the question is, what is next? Well, JP Morgan has estimated that this port strike could cost $5 billion or 6% of the GDP per day. And every day the strike continues, it will take 6 days to remove those backlogs. But that is not all. We also have to look at supply and demand. If the volume is not there and the demand is, so if consumers are still needing those products, especially considering the fact that we are about to enter the holiday season if we're not there already, the demand is going to be higher than usual from the consumer side, but there's going to be a lack of product. What does that mean? It means that prices will go up. It means inflation. The next question is, what about trucking? This is a trucking channel. What is going to happen with trucking? Well, there is this potential scenario that could happen. Since there is going to be a lack of volume in the East Coast, and we are going to assume that some of those containers are going to be rerouted to the West Coast, of course, people are going to kind of migrate. Carriers are going to migrate to the West where the volume should be. Whether it will actually be there, whether it will get unloaded, whether it will get serviced, that's a different question. But the assumption is that a lot of the volume from the East Coast and the Gulf ports are going to be moved to the West Coast, so the volume will increase there. However, there could be a situation where shippers on the ground in the East Coast are going to face a situation where they will have a lack of capacity because everyone migrated to where the volumes could potentially be. And that could mean that yes, there is a possibility, at least in the short term, that rates in the East Coast are going to increase. Now, here is the issue, and I think this is the biggest one because it doesn't allow us to plan. We don't know how long this port strike is going to last, but here are the facts. First, the Longshoremen's Association president, Harold Daggett, who happens to look a lot like my father-in-law, he was very clear. He is trying to fight automation because for him, the most important thing is job security for his men. But the likelihood that the ports are going to concede and remove all automation from the ports is slim to none. Fact number 2. We are very close to the election. Biden has already made it crystal clear that he is not going to invoke the Taft-Hartley Act, which would essentially mean that these port workers who are striking would be forced to go back to work for 80 days for a cooling off period. Fact number 3, even if Biden today or tomorrow said that's it, I'm invoking the Taft-Hartley Act, the president of the Longshoremen's Association, Harold Daggett, has said that yes, the president absolutely has the power to force him and his men to go back to work, but that would just mean they would go back, but they would just move a fraction of what they usually do. And that means delays in either case. So guys, it seems like we are at an impasse, which unfortunately is going to affect everyone. And let me give you some names of who actually relies on the ports. Michelin and Goodyear happen to be huge importers, and of course Michelin and Goodyear are the companies that make those tires that we also use. This could lead to a tire shortage. Now, next we have General Motors, Hyundai, Bob's Furniture, Home Depot, IKEA. These are top importers. Of course, agricultures, restaurants, grocery stores, manufacturers, they all rely on those imports, and the list goes on and on. Now, at this time, I'm not able to offer where I stand on this issue because it's an ongoing battle in my own head. On the one hand, from the human perspective, I do understand the reasoning for the strike and why they're trying to fight automation. I get it. On the other hand, the country I love is about to be plunged into the biggest chaos ever. So, again, I'm not able to tell you with certainty where I stand at the moment, but I would love to hear your opinions. I know people have a lot of opinions on the strike. Some are very much for it, some say that that's what the trucking industry should do in order to get everyone's attention as to how essential we actually are to the economy and to the flow of goods. Some people say that the Longshoremen's Association is trying to fight progress, which is just not going to happen. So I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me and watching today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.